a playlist original.
From Wes Craven, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
There's something out there, isn't there?
She's the only one who can stop it. If she fails, no one will survive.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Nightmare on Elm Street, rated R.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your host, Gaius and Jackson. Jackson is not here with us today. He's still busy with his class schedule, but fear not, you will hear him again later this week because we're doing a 10 year anniversary episode for Interstellar, one of his favorite movies. So you'll be able to hear him on that. In the meantime, we're covering another anniversary, the 40th anniversary of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I invited back a podcast fairly quickly. I did say I would love to have them on again. And didn't think it would be this soon. I don't know if they thought it would be this soon, but I'm happy that it is. Welcoming back Brooke and Mark from their podcast. A podcast on Elm Street. You're gonna all be like, "Hey, you probably invited them because of the name of their podcast." That was part of it, at least the motivation at the beginning. I was like, "That would work out." It's nice, but they were also really great on the Idle Hands episode too, so that also helps. So welcome back, Brooke and Mark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanhanks for having us.
Definitely didn't expect it to be this soon.
You know what? I didn't either. But I'm going to, and also I was like, oh, Tales of Horror is over. Even though we had some bonus episodes that we released with Jackson on them, I was like, hey, we can finally stop talking about horror movies for a little bit. But I was like, it's the 40th anniversary of Nightmare on Elm Street. I have to cover that one.
Yeah.
So we can keep the horror thing going a little into November. And then I was like, yeah, I mean, the name of their podcast, it's perfect for having them on here. If anything, it'll be good cross promotion for your show too. So it just made sense, and I'm glad you guys are so willing to come back as soon as you guys did. So looking forward to the chat about this movie. I do. I don't know which one of you was when I messaged initially that you were like, hey, full disclosure, like not a big fan of like the entire franchise. I was like, oh, it's just the first movie, or just like the first movie. So I think we'll be good.
Yeah.
Just in case someone didn't hear you guys on the Idle Hands episode, tell everyone who you are and what your podcast is all about, and if there's anything that you guys are currently working on that you guys are excited about.
All right. Want me to do it, Brooke?
Always, man. Always.
He's like, you're the hype, man.
Yeah, I guess so. So yeah, we are a podcast on Elm Street. We're just two guys from up here in Canada who share a love for horror movies. So we have based our podcast on horror movies, obviously. We actually just celebrated our 5th year anniversary doing the podcast.
Oh, congratulations. Nice.
Thank you. It's fucking crazy how quick that flew by. But we re-recorded our first ever episode, which was on Midsommar. That just dropped today, actually. So if your listeners want to check that out, don't listen to the original one, because I went back and I checked it out while I was editing, and I was like, oh man, this is bad. But
hey, it's all you learn from the humble beginnings of this is very like when I go back to listen to the early episodes, it's like, oh, like I'm so glad some of them are buried deep far away. Like I think this episode I think 212 that we're recording right now, and come a long way since the beginning of that. Also a really cool idea. I never thought about, because Jackson's been on the show. It'll be 2 years in January. He wasn't here at the beginning. And I was always thinking, like, how do we, like, I would love to repurpose old episodes, but like those co-hosts aren't on the show anymore. Like, how do you do it? And that is probably a good way to do it. I mean, it's to kind of just go back and re-record something from back in the day. And then hopefully if you have someone new, you get to put that person on that episode. And if you are like, hey, we're better at this now, let's tackle this again. That's a really good idea, actually.
Plus, you get a fresh perspective on it too, right?
Yeah. What was it like re-recording it? I mean, was it you felt better about it, and then listening back to it, were you like, oh, this is like so much better?
So much better. We knew what to talk about. We, I don't know, elaborated some more on some things throughout the movie. I don't know, just a lot more fluid.
yeah, because there's no like when I first did it, we didn't like have like it's not like we rehearsed how to. We just kind of recorded it
Mhm.
and winged it, and it's not like it was like awful. It was just like maybe a little you know prep,
Yeah.
not what we were talking about. We knew what we were talking about, how to discuss it. I think it was just more like the flow, and when you have at the time there was three of us, so who's going to say what when, and
Mhm.
how do you not like jump all over each other? I mean, we got better with each episode, but it's been a while since I've gone back to like maybe the first 15 or so.
Mhm.
And because we kind of hit our stride a little bit after that, right around episode like 16 or 17, and it got better. But yeah, I think if I listened to those now, I would just kind of like get secondhand embarrassment from listening to it. Who knows?
Definitely.
Well, we watched the movie in my basement, right, together, I think.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering correctly. So it's already like a 2.5 hour movie at that point. We watched it, and then we set my phone up on my coffee table in the basement and just recorded it on my phone through the Anchor app.
Oh, okay.
And then just like no mics, no nothing, just fully recorded on my phone. Just to get that first episode out.
Yeah, just like, oh, let's get it out, let's crank it out and see what happens. And were you proud of it at the time? Were you like, oh, yeah, this is pretty good, or were you like, oh, this can use work? Okay.
I mean, how can you not be, right? You created this thing, and you've I don't know, I guess we're brave enough to just kind of put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah. Especially like the first few, like especially tracking like what country listened to it, and you get so excited, like, oh, someone in Germany listened. And now, like 5 years later, like I don't even really know what our stats are. Like I don't really care about the stats, just kind of doing it for fun now, right?
Fun. Yeah. That is kind of fun when you like see that. You're like, who in France is listening to this show?
Yeah.
You're like really like excited by that. But we've gotten messages from people that like in same situation, like Germany and stuff. Like it's cool because you have a whatever reach you have, and it's gotten that far. So yeah, Jackson and I we don't get too concerned with stats, and so we like kind of wait a while to like check them again. We don't like I think when I first started it, I think I was more obsessive about it in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then our podcast network was like, hey, you probably best not to check it a lot in the beginning because you're gonna get discouraged, because in the beginning you're just a small fish in a very big pond. So you're not really getting the numbers you probably want to get. So it's good now. We take a lot of time off from looking at them. And then that's we're pleasantly surprised when we do check them. So that's the upside to it. We really just do it. I mean, hey, it's great to like get something from it, but I think we lead with having fun first before anything else. So that's the best way to go about it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we're not making retirement money doing this, so there's no point obsessing over it.
Yep. It's a good time with your friends to discuss. I mean, I bet I was hanging out with my friends over the weekend, and I have a friend named Connor, and like he's been dating this girl for like a year, and like I hadn't met her before because like she's always works out of town a lot, and she finally was like there for the weekend, and she just discovered our podcast, and she had no idea that like I was into horror movies, and then she kind of found all the like Tales of Horror episodes, and we just like riffed a long time about horror movies, and like her boyfriend kind of was like, hey, I'm here too. And she's like, hey, yeah, whatever. But like she would say that she wants to start like a horror movie podcast with one of her girlfriends. So they always talk about horror movies. And I was like, just do it. Like, have fun with it. I mean, find the lane that you want to, work in. Like if you have a hook, then like make that work for you. But like, just do it for fun. And that's the best way to do it. So that's what I would recommend to anyone that wants to start out. Like, don't go into it like, oh, I hope so many people listen in the beginning. I hope I make so much money. It's best to be realistic about it. And then like if good things happen from it, like it's a added bonus in the end. So that's the best part about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So the last time you guys were on, we did a horror comedy. We talked about Idle Hands, and I love that you guys sent me whoever runs. I don't know who runs the your Instagram more than the other, but Mark, okay. I was happy that you did send the Idle Hands remake news to me, because I was that's we were just talking about like where would it go for me, or like what happens with it now, and I think it's pretty cool. I mean, for some like part of me is like, okay, maybe you can reimagine it for a new audience, and it looks like they have some talented people involved. I do wonder if they would like to involve anyone from the original movie.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. But yeah, I thought that was good timing. That we had just talked about that. Pretty cool. And I love Devisawa posted something about his kids or something. Being excited that after Stranger Things is attached to it. And he had an old man moment. He was like, well, your dad was in the original. And I'm cool too.
It'd be cool if they brought him back for the Vivica A. Fox type role.
That'd be a cool way to do it. I mean, I think it would be a missed opportunity if they bring someone back and he's the most likely, I think person they could bring back. It'd be really fun to kind of see them do it. And it'd be also really funny if it, I mean, I know it won't be that hard to be financially more successful because the movie didn't make that much money. But it is a cult hit. Like we talked about that. So I could see it being reimagined in a way that would make it a hit. And I think since the original came out and we talked about through home video, DVD, Blu-ray and all that, it became a bigger movie. So I'm looking forward to what they're doing with it. And it's one of those movies too that can be remade. It's not like one of those sacred, don't touch it kind of movies. So that could be a good thing.
Yeah.
This one where they were talking about today, oddly enough, had a remake. That one would probably prefer never, ever, ever existed. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask you: have you guys seen the remake in it at all or recently? I was actually bringing it up with a friend, and I realized that I had not seen it, even though I do own it on Blu-ray because I'm a completist at heart. I haven't watched it since theaters, the remake, because I was that disappointed in it.
I think it's been about that long too for me.
I think I don't know. I have it on Blu-ray as well. I think maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe. It's been a while.
Is it any better? In the 6 years that you because it's been longer for me since I've seen it. I just remember leaving the theater and I think I was with 5 other friends and they were like, "Hey, you're not saying much," because I have nothing to say.
I mean, it definitely it definitely has problems, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be. But it's definitely not great. But
yeah. Of the I guess 3 major ones featuring the big, icons from the 80s with Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Which of those 3 do you think had the better remake?
It's probably Halloween because they did more with it. The Friday the 13th remake I thought was pretty decent, but that whole franchise has just been held at gunpoint for the past 15 years.
Really right? Yeah, hostage.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably Halloween just because of what they've done with it.
I'm a huge fan of Rob Zombie's Halloween, so that's definitely my pick.
So I think the only one that didn't make me walk out of the theater in silence was Friday the 13th. I don't think that one was perfect either. I remember when that one started. That was it. The first 15 minutes of it, which feels like its own little short film attached from the rest of the movie, is really good. And I was like, all right, we're cooking. This is gonna be so great. And then the rest of the movie happened, and I was like, oh, not as good as the start. Rob Zombie's Halloween, I did not like at first. I've learned to appreciate it for what it is over time. I'm not a big fan of the first hour of it, where we had the whole Rob Zombie-esque backstory for Michael Myers. And it's not like the last half of it, which is feels like an accelerated remake of the original movie, is perfect, but I found things to enjoy about it. Now the sequel to that, I can't find anything to enjoy about it. It's hard. But definitely with time I've grown on it. Where I don't think it's a dumpster fire. There's some really good shots in it. Some of the performances are really good. Tyler Maine's pretty good as Michael Myers as well. So there's some stuff to take away from it, I think.
Yeah.
So not all bad. But I guess allow us to take you back to 1984 with Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. We had to ask these questions when we have anniversary episodes. It's kind of similar to what we did with Idle Hands on Tales of Horror. I guess, Brooke, I'll start with you. Do you remember when you first saw A Nightmare on Elm Street, and kind of how it's been, how long it's been with you and all that good stuff?
I don't know exactly the first time I've seen it. Like, I'm sure as a young teenager, I probably saw bits and pieces of it, but I probably didn't watch it till I don't know. I was in middle high school, maybe. And I've definitely watched it like quite a few times, you know, like every year. But every few years, I rewatched the first one that we're doing today. So
Nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a watch that is in my rotation.
Very cool. What about you, Mark?
This was one of the first horror movies I ever watched, and I was way too young to have watched it.
You and I are gonna have a similar story, I think. Yeah.
One of my mom's friends was babysitting me, and she was quite a bit younger than my mom, but like still like, I don't know, late 20s, let's say. And we went to the movie store, and she let me pick out a movie to rent, and I found this one, and I love the cover with is that supposed to be Heather Langenkamp on the
like Nancy on the cover?
Yeah. So I loved the cover, and she let me borrow it. I think I was like 7, maybe 8.
Yeah, around the same age too. Way too young.
Yeah, way too young. But I mean, hey, I'm here now, and I love horror movies, so this I can attribute it to this movie in some sense.
Yep, like you, way too young. I probably was around the same age. I actually saw the 3 we were talking about that were remade pretty close to each other, like the original Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. I remember not being that afraid of Friday the 13th as a kid. Halloween is my favorite horror movie, and it still freaks me out today. So it definitely freaked me out as a kid. And it's the whole like, small town, it can happen here vibe that Halloween gives, which is why I think it's scary. And Nightmare on Elm Street was scary to me on a different level. I mean, as a kid, you can recall having nightmares, and that idea of if you die in your dreams, you die for real. That is pretty scary concept. And then if you throw in, your own little personal boogeyman into that concept, which would be Freddy Krueger, that makes the concept even scarier. So I was way too young when I saw it. It definitely scared me as a child. But what I've learned to appreciate it as I've gotten older, and what I really like about it is the stuff that Wes Craven put in there, that's in like the themes of it, where you have this scary thing that's after you, and there's this fear quotient that's there, and the only way to kind of defeat it is to face it. And then you can actually, that there's that whole scene at the end where she turns her back on him, and like that's how she basically vanquishes the monster. Oh well, if they would have let Wes Craven have his way, that would have been how, without that little button at the end of the movie.
So bad.
But like that, that was like, how you defeat, the monster, basically. That fear is giving this thing energy, and it's feeding off of that. And I love that idea of it. And the fact that, our heroine at the end is brave enough to face him down and say, like, I'm taking back every energy I gave you, and then demands all the things she wants back from her mother, her friends, everything that he took from her, and basically saying that he's nothing anymore. I kind of wish that was where things ended. I know the people in New Line really wanted the button at the end, because they thought like maybe we can bring it back, and of course they did a lot. And I know there was a big fight between people at New Line and Wes Craven about the ending. I wish Wes Craven's ending makes more sense in the grand scheme of things. The story he's trying to tell. I kind of wish that was how we ended things, but it is what it is. We have what we have, and like, there wouldn't be a franchise without it, for better or worse, because there's still some other entries in the franchise I enjoy, and they're fun. But it definitely gave it more of a bit more depth than like a typical horror movie, especially a horror movie from the 80s. And it's more than like shock value. It's more than like gore. It's more than a standard slasher movie. There's a lot more going on in the story, and I think that's what I've liked about it for as long as it's been in my life. I've seen the movie a lot. I watched 4K to do it for this, and it looks great. So that was awesome. It was good to see it like that for the first time. yeah, it's one of those simple horror movies that has been with me like Halloween, like Friday the 13th. It is a classic of the genre, and I would, even though I prefer Halloween as a film, I think there's a lot more ideas cooking here that one could argue that this is a better concept than what John Carpenter did with Halloween. They're different movies, but Wes Craven had a lot more to say, I think, with putting this together, and did it well.
For sure.
As far as I do want to start it off by one of the big things about Freddy Krueger, and I feel I guess it's more ambiguous in this movie about what he was like as a human being, child murderer, or there's more to that. I know the remake went the extra mile, like, we're gonna, those lines that you were reading in between since the first movie, we're just gonna flat out say it, like he was a child murderer and child molester. I actually had to cover that for MovieWeb, and there was a big debate by some of our readers about what he was in this movie, and because it's very clear what he is in the remake. But what were your thoughts on like who he was here? Like, is it obvious that is he just a child murderer? Was there more here, or is it just left ambiguous for like the audience to kind of put their own kind of imagination onto what he was doing before he became Freddy Krueger?
I mean, there's some instances throughout the movie where it kind of leans more towards the pedophilia or the molestation, like when Nancy's in the tub and he's like creeping his hand up to the tub. Yeah. So I mean, it's not right in your face. Craven doesn't slap you in the face with it, but I think there are some instances throughout the movie where it's kind of implied.
Yeah. What about you, bro?
Yeah. I don't really get that in this movie because I feel like when this movie came out in the 80s, like that kind of thing wasn't talked about, or I feel like it was way more talked about in the 2000s because it was more, I don't know if it was more frequent, but more out there of this stuff can happen.
Right.
So I didn't really get it with this movie, but I could see what Mark is saying though, for sure.
Yeah, I think I like, even if it wasn't like an original concept, if he was trying to take it that far and maybe dialed it back, I like the more ambiguous nuance of like, hey, because I think your imagination can make things a lot worse than they are. And if you're hearing that story that her mother tells her, like about how he used to take kids down to his abandoned boiler room and what he would do to them, like even if like it's not said, my imagination is putting something much worse because of what I'm thinking might have happened. So I think I think the remake tried to be a bit darker by just flat out saying it and making it and I know like part of when they were making it, I read that because Freddy over the years had become this kind of like pop culture icon and less scary than he was in 1984. I mean, he was basically celebrity in his own right. They were trying to like make sure that they went for a darker version of the character, and that was one way to do it. But I don't think the whole not putting it in your face thing necessarily works. I think it's kind of like you get to decide yourself, like whether reading between the lines is take it as you will. I agree with you. There's stuff in the movie, like the bathtub thing is one of them. I think the way he like even stalks them in a sense, like is there's more implied there than what is being said. And I don't really need to hear it. I can just kind of take that as I may, and like add my own like level of fear to that. And I think it works better without hitting the nail on the head, like exactly with that point.
I like what you said about how he became like kind of a pop culture icon throughout the years too. And like this movie was pretty serious. Like there was some comedic parts to it, but the franchise as a whole kind of really took a turn into more horror comedy as it went on. And like up until the point where New Nightmare was so meta, like it was basically like a documentary style in a sense. So I like how you said like with the remake, they kind of took a darker turn on it. Maybe they were trying to bring it back to this darker root of this movie because of the fact that Freddy kind of became like a stand-up comedian throughout the franchise.
I think by the time, so I love Dream Warriors, but that is where it's feels like it starts. He's a little bit more quippy, not quite as quippy as like 4. I think 4 is when it. I mean, they call that one the MTV Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's very clear that it is. By that point, he's in music videos. He has his own TV show. There's a 900 number. Someone shared a clip with me where he was promoting Nightmare 4 on some Nickelodeon show. I don't know what it was, but it was so like this guy who was made here to be at least all in terms of child murderer in this movie. By the time you get to the 4th movie is I think Heather Langkamp's character in New Nightmares says it like everyone knows who Freddy Krueger is. He's like Santa Claus, and that's kind of like how he became. And it is interesting to think about like what he is here, because he's used very sparingly in the first movie. I mean he's not. I mean he's in it enough, but he's not in it a lot. They kind of know like the monster is more effective when you kind of hide him a bit, and that's why the first, no matter how many times I've seen it, not so much the opening scene in the boiler room, it's the second dream that Tina has where it's like in the alleyway, and that's your first image of him, like
with the
like
arms,
all in shadow in the arms, like that shot of him to me remains iconic and still creepy and holds up pretty well. That is the first real image of him, and like. Again, mostly obscured in shadow too. It was just the hat, like a little glimpse of his face, and and I think that works the best. And he's probably more effective when he's not used as the person that sets up a punchline, which is what he ended up becoming in the later movies.
Yeah, it's like people forgot what he was like as the franchise moves on. Like at the end of this movie, like back in 1984, people probably like fuck Freddy Krueger, fucking child murderer. And then as the franchise moves on, they're just like, yeah, I love that guy. He's so funny. And like the movies are hilarious. And it's just like, no, they're not supposed to be. Like this guy murdered children.
They're probably rooting for him more than they're rooting for the leads after at a certain point. Like, and I mean, like I said, I love the third movie. But and I used to not want to admit that's where it started. I was like, no, man, it's just as good as the original. I mean, it does have like some of the original sensibilities, but you are getting more of him in that third movie, and he's definitely funnier. Like I don't think I mean, if he's funny in this movie, it's like it's dark, like darkly funny. It's not like intentionally trying to be funny. And I know people that love Freddy as the kind of fun guy who cracks jokes and throws profanities at the character's way and all that stuff. But and there's definitely an audience for it. I kind of tap out. I mean, the 4th one's fun too, but I think like I really tap out at 5 and 6, where it's like, oh, this is might be fun for you guys, but not fun for me. So I don't really get it. I do like New Nightmare for what it allowed Wes Craven to do, which is kind of like he lost control of what that franchise was, and he got to take control of it and end it in his own way. And of course, they made Freddy vs. Jason after that, but like he got to end that main story the way that he wanted to end it. So that's why I like New Nightmare.
I think why people like him too is because for the big guys we had, like you had Mike Myers, Leatherface, Jason, they're all very similar, right? They don't talk at all. They're just big hulking guys. And then I think Wes came in and just totally changed kind of how we view villains. There's this funny, quirky, crazy guy, right? So I think that's why people also like Freddy, is because he's so different from the other killers that we get in movies.
Good point.
Yep. Gave him a personality, and which makes him more like methodical than someone like Michael Myers or Jason. Since they don't communicate, they're only known for like their brute strength and all that stuff. And there's I think also a manipulation that goes on with Freddy Krueger that they don't have too as well. That I think that works pretty well. The way he kind of toys. I mean, in this movie alone, the way he kind of toys with all of them. I also like how it's set up too. And I know they kind of discussed this in the other movies, and it's not really like hammered home a lot in the first movie, but it is in a few scenes where I do love the realization that collectively these friends have been all dreaming about him, whether or not they want to talk about it or not. Like Glenn doesn't talk about dreaming about him, but then there's that one scene where Nancy's describing her dream to Tina when they're sleeping over at her house, and she's describing what he looks like and the things she heard. And they have that shot of him where he looks up at her or at them. And that one shot with Johnny Depp, you can tell that he's also had that same dream about him. And that is another creepy thing about it too, that you have this collective thing that you've all have in common. You all have been dreaming about this one person. You can't even explain it. And then also they don't know it yet until things get out of hand, but your parents have been hiding this big secret from you. And it inadvertently has to deal with what you've been dreaming about. And like all that stuff is really interesting.
Yeah.
As well.
And like Glenn and Rod. Yeah, Rod. Back in the 80s, like, you know, masculinity was a huge thing, right? Like they can't show that they're like scared or they're having like these, you know, female thoughts of like Freddie and stuff like that, right? They can't kind of show that softer side of them, like to be scared and stuff.
Right. That's very true. And like I think because Rod says like, you know, with Tina, where like he's like something along the lines of like no more nightmares for both of us then, and then like, and then she's like, oh, you've had a nightmare, and he's like, guys have nightmares too, you know, you don't have a corner on the market on it for something, and it's such a machismo thing to kind of shut down what she just said. But almost a slip of being vulnerable with her, like, you know, like they've all been dreaming about the same thing, and you know, she is the one that's at that time been the most vocal about it, because it's clear that like I always wondered if like, because I don't really know if they explained this or not, if he methodically went after Tina more first to then maybe get to the rest of them, because like they kind of all talk about how they dreamed about them, but it seems to be getting to Tina more. It seems at least when we are entered the movie, and you know, and the focus is on her at first.
Yeah, maybe because she's like the weaker of the four of them, maybe.
That's what I was gonna say too. Yeah,
because it seems like Glenn like has a little bit more. I was gonna say that Glenn might have a little bit more control of it, but it could have been like he never had control, and Freddie was just waiting to like really get him, because he does get him easily when he does eventually finally have his one final.
I think Glenn session. Was just a bit, I think, careless and lazy, right? Like his one job that one night was to look over Nancy, right? And he tells her, "Oh yeah, I'll wake you up for sure," and then he falls asleep.
That's probably Heather Langenkamp's like one of her best moments in the movie. I just love like most of my girlfriends who have seen it just love that, because they're always like, boys, see, we can't like to tell you to do anything. It's just like it's the slap, and she's like, "What did you do, you little shit? You fell asleep." And then like it's also when he wakes up, he's kind of like, "What?" Like she's had this like full on like struggle in her dreams, and like when she wakes up, she's like full on screaming. The alarm clock is like going off, and the fact that like when she addresses him, his reaction is just what? It's so funny. Like
totally forgot what he was supposed to be doing.
Yeah. But you are right about how like the guys handled the situation in this movie. Like Glenn like seems to be the one that seems to be the one that's in the most control, or thinks he is, because he's trying to tells her what to do if she's having a bad nightmare, how to like basically switch it and like take control in it. And I guess what he does tell her helps her in the end. I mean, she is able to do that by the end of it, where she, you know, that's what she does at the end. She takes control of it and tells him what's not going to happen anymore, and she's not going to be afraid of him anymore. So I think that works for Glenn up to a point until he got kind of maybe careless. And I don't think he really bought into, even though it was what seemed like a group psychosis, group kind of nightmare, I don't really think he bought into what they were all dreaming about compared to the others. I think even Rod might have bought into it a little bit more than him, but just didn't address it, because of the two men, he's supposed to be the more alpha, you know, tough guy of the bunch.
Yeah.
Which is interesting too. Like, you know, I think it's also funny too. I know they're all friends because Rod is dating Tina. I was when I was watching it for this, I like had to chuckle when like he scares them, and then like Glenn's kind of like, I don't know if he feels emasculated or whatever. And then he says, like, "Oh, what are you guys doing? Are you having an orgy or something?" He's like, "Well, maybe a funeral, dickhead." He just pulls a like knife on them. Not something that your friends just casually do. But I do love that Nancy kind of shuts it down right away. She's like, "It's just a sleepover date," and like takes it from him with like no fear whatsoever. Like she's not like this is clearly happened before. Like this is not normal, or it is normal for them and their little like group. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. That like that's probably the only reason that they're friends, because like Tina dates this like bad boy. But he does have I do like that they give him shades like of not being that. Like, his discussion with Nancy about when he admits like the dream that he's been having, and it's about Freddy. Clearly, I kind of wish if like I had told my friend that you clearly been having the same dream. I always laugh the way she backs out of the cell, like almost like she's disgusted. And he's like, "You believe me?" And she's like, "You believe me, right?" And she's like, "Yeah." And she's like, but she like kind of runs out and bangs on the door to get out. Like I don't know, a little bit more support would have been better, I think, for Rod in that moment. But I do like that they give him that one moment before they kill him off, that he's more than what he appeared to be in the beginning when they first introduced him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he could be more afraid than like the rest of them. Maybe not more afraid than Tina, but he may have been more afraid than the other two, the other people in the bunch as well. So, what were your
loss of control?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, definitely. And that, I mean, I think that's what. No, you're good. I think that's what we all kind of go through when we have dreams or nightmares. It's like that feeling of like not having control in them, which I think the movie does a pretty good. Like, there's that scene where she sees Freddy and Rod's cell, and then he chases her back to her house. And I love the way they shoot her running. She's not running fast; she's running slow, and that's how you typically feel like you're running in your dream. You can't really run fast. I love that they did all that stuff to really make you feel like you are in a dream. And they could get away with a lot of stuff that maybe doesn't make entirely a lot of sense, because they're like, hey, it's a dream. It doesn't really have to make sense. I think they did that well, and they actually kind of maybe covered up a little, like, not screenwriting issues, but anything that you're like, hey, like, I think you can even cover up some of the effects that may be dated for like 84. That you're like, well, it's a dream. That's what it looked like. I don't know. Like, you kind of get away with a lot, a lot there. But what were you gonna say before I interrupted you on that?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, just the fear of loss of control, like with Rod, because he's someone who has, I don't know, he's a big tough guy, so he feels like he's in control all the time.
Yeah.
So,
what were your thoughts? Because my little brother, he used to be deeply afraid of horror movies. And I remember one of the scenes that he walked in on when I was watching this movie when he was younger was Tina's death scene. And I think it scarred him for almost life until he got to a point where he could actually watch these movies. Still, at the age I am at now, and I've seen the movie a lot, it's still so visceral and works so well. And, considering that they had little money to work with and how they put that together, that scene is probably the best scene in the movie, or one of the best scenes in the movie. What were your thoughts on it when you kind of first saw it, and like, do you think it still kind of holds up really well in the film?
For me, not really, and it's because of Scary Movie 2. I just instantly think of that scene from Scary Movie 2. Like, it's not taken from that movie. I don't think so. But yeah, I think of that scene from Scary Movie 2. It just, it makes me laugh. So that scene just kind of doesn't do it for me anymore. I
think the Scary Movie franchise has ruined a lot of horror movies for people.
Yeah.
What about you, Mark?
I mean, I still like it. Like, I think what Craven was able to do with like no CGI back then and make it look as realistic as it does, I think they did a great job. Like, it starts off with the sheet on the bed, like it's moving around, and then we don't see anything. We don't know what the hell's happening, and then all of a sudden she just like shoots to the ceiling and she's getting thrown all around the room. And poor Rod's just standing there like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think, I think it's a really cool scene. It's not my favorite of the movie, but I think it's really good. It's well done.
Yeah, I think just because it's so jarring, it's the first big moment or kill of the movie. It's probably why it stands out. I still like remember as a kid, like the first like cut of her stomach, and then like all the blood starts coming out. I was like, oh, I mean, like it again. I mean, we both saw it way too young, so that was a lot. And then the like she has that like gurgle noise that she's making like when it happens, and then like what I like about the scene now though is this like I love that you're in one moment you're in the dream with her and like you see him, he's physically attacking her, and then once that sheet comes off and it's just her thrashing around, I love that they still keep his like voice in that scene too. You just can't see him, and it's just that idea. And then Ra has no control over what's going on. You can't do anything to help her, and I know it's a pretty well done scene. And like you said, like for what he had to work with, then like it still holds up in a way that at least looks good by 1984 standards, and still holds up pretty well. And it's a bloody mess as well.
Yeah. For me, the one that sticks out to me, like I remember watching it kind of scared me was Glenn's death. Just never seen anything like that before, especially that much blood. Like I think I've watched this probably before The Shining, so like seeing like all that blood, and just the thought of getting pulled into your bed, just terrifying.
Yeah, it holds up. That scene holds up really well too, and there's a lot of stuff about that scene that makes me mad. It has nothing to do with like the scene itself. It's well done. I understand why his parents would want him to talk to Nancy, because like she clearly, to adults not knowing what's going on, she probably does look crazy. I think it's one scene where his parents are across the street and she's like in her window and she definitely looks like she's insane. And they're just like,
they got like the steel bars on the window.
Yeah, Mom put those in like while she was at school, and then he's basically like, I don't want our kid around that kid anymore. It's just kind of like, all right. And like it's not, they don't know it, but like when you're watching the movie, like, man, if you just let her talk to him, like, well, it wouldn't happen. Maybe like he would have been awake. That scene is and like I always freak. Like one of my friends reminded me watching it. She's like, because I never paid attention to it, but she's like, it's so sad when he's getting like swallowed down in the bed. He actually calls out to his mom. I was like, oh, I did not realize that until they told me that. And when I watched it for this, I was like, that makes it kind of sad as well. Because that is what you would probably do if you're a teenager, and that was what was going on. And like you said, like it's when you first see it, it's like everything gets sucked into the bed, and there's like that pause, and I think they cut to Nancy like screaming his name, and then cuts back to the room, and then it's just like the volcano of just I guess all of Glenn's Gleiser. There you go, just all his insides and body parts just blended. And for a movie like this to have two money shots like that, you got the Tina scene in that one. That's and also done pretty well and pretty effectively too. So and still holds up pretty well. And
bothered me about this movie a bit is like the cops. They just seem not good at their job. Like, they don't seem concerned at all through the whole movie, right? Like, because does Rod know about the whole Freddy Krueger thing, or is his wife kind of hold that from him, right?
Well, the Nancy's dad. Does he know about?
Yeah.
I thought so. I got the impression that he knows, because when they go to, I think it's Rod's funeral, and she's basically like, Rod didn't kill Tina, and he's like, well, if he didn't kill Tina, do you know who did? And she mentions what this person looks like. And they have the close up on the mom's face, and they have the close up on his face. They both look like they know something. I got the impression that he also was aware, but they do kind of put more emphasis on the mom knowing more. Maybe because he doesn't really discuss it at all, even when it's kind of thrown his way as like his daughter's mentioning this person that, hey, like she should know who he is because we did away with him a long time ago. He doesn't really address it to his ex-wife that way, and he doesn't really address it to Nancy that way. Like the mom is the only one that does, and I don't know if that's just like a screenwriting mishap or what, but it does seem in that funeral scene where they have that close-in zoom on both their faces that he is aware of at least who this person was or what he looked like or something along those lines. maybe not involved in the whole like setting him on fire thing.
Yeah.
But probably knows.
I feel like him being, what is he, a lieutenant or sheriff or something? I feel like there would be history books of
this happening,
of Fred Krueger's, like whether there's history like of what they did to him. I don't know. They might have, like the town might have kept that hush hush, but there's definitely got to be reports of what he did.
Right.
You would think. So even if he wasn't there at the time, like he would still have access to that evidence and whatnot.
Who he was and what happened to him ultimately. Yeah. That's it. That's a discussion because I don't think anyone is. None of my friends have brought up like I agree. Like it seems like the mom, at least, was not just involved in like this person was doing this to the kids on our street, and like I feel like the mom definitely was like one of the parents that was there that like she definitely was involved in setting him on fire and killing him with a bunch
of other parents. You can see the signs as well. Like she's an alcoholic. She
has all this like guilt and like
right. And like she isn't like the best mother to Nancy. Like she drinks a lot and has not so nice new husbands and stuff, right? So
and it's interesting. Ronnie Blakely, who plays her mother, she Academy Award nominated actress. She makes some interesting acting choices in the movie, and I haven't reconciled all of them, even in all the times that I've watched it. I can't tell if it just feels like she's in another movie sometimes compared to everyone else, like overacting a little bit. I don't know if that's just me that thinks that, or if it's just a product of the time. It was just the 80s, and that's but definitely feels off, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that's a character choice or acting choice on her part.
Was this her first?
She was in Roger Altman's Nashville in 1975, and that's what she was nominated for an Oscar for.
I was seeing if it was her first horror movie, and it looks like it is. So that may be, like, I don't know. Like you said, if she's like an Academy Award nominated actress, like this may just be uncharted territory for her. Maybe she doesn't really know what to do.
she thinks it's Shakespeare, and like it's not. Like she's not awful throughout the whole thing. It's just like I feel like every motion she makes. I think on the commentary I listened to it a long time ago with Wes Craven and Heather Langenkamp, they talk about her like kind of like cigarette acting too, where like everything is very dramatic. Like when they're at the dream clinic and like she lights up which is so funny that you could do that in the 80s, I guess. That she just lights up a cigarette in like the dream clinic room. Like everything is just very dramatic that she does. And I always have an issue with people that play drunk when they don't seem like they're drunk, and like they've try too hard to act like they're drunk. And I feel like that's what she does towards the end, where she's clearly wasted when Nancy tries to get out and she's all like, it's locked. I locked it all up. Like, I mean, Wes Craven was there. He directed it. I mean, I think maybe those are choices that she wanted to make, and he was kind of like, who am I to like tell someone who's been nominated for the Academy Award how to truly perform? But she feels like the only one overacting in the movie compared to everyone else.
There's a lot of times where I found. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. She definitely feels like she feels like she's in another film at times. What were you gonna say?
There's some times where like Heather Langenkamp too. I'm not a huge fan of her. I don't think she's a great actress. But there's a few times in this movie where I was like, "Oh my god, man!" Like just overacting with her too.
I was going to ask you guys this because this is always a big bone of contention with my friends who love horror movies. So there's on the one hand, Nancy as a character is a great final girl. Like she, stands up to the monster. Like and then of course we get to see her again in the third movie. And then I think honestly, Heather Langenkamp's best acting is in New Nightmare, where she's playing a version of herself. But then one of my buddies was like, yeah, Nancy's great, but there's some moments in Nightmare 1 where she's just not good. And I was formed the opinion, like, I think her not being completely polished works in her favor a little bit.
Yeah.
In the first movie, where like you almost like, I think you need someone that feels like they're not acting so much, and like she seems kind of like she seems so fresh that it's just like you feel like you're watching a normal teenage girl, and I think that works in her favor in some scenes. Now there's other scenes. I think she starts off rough. If that makes sense. Like I think she gets better as the movie goes on. But like there's some line delivery by her, like, and I guess maybe in her first few scenes where it's like, oh, like she is acting, like you can tell like she's just like reading lines. But but then she has the scene like when they're at the after Tina dies and she's explaining why they were there, and like I thought that scene was pretty good, that she just didn't want to be alone. That's why we stayed with her and all that stuff. Like there's certain scenes that she handles pretty well, and she's got one hell of a scream, so that's good for a horror movie. But I agree with you. There's some rough edges. Is there any scene in particular where you're like, oh, this is not so good? Are you like just like most of it?
I can't think. The bathroom scene, like whenever she's in the tub, like whenever she's getting out of the tub, and her mom's like flipping out. That's the only thing that's coming to the forefront of my mind right now. I was like, oh man, like it's just like cringy the way that she's talking.
Yeah,
and I don't know.
But. Yep, that scene is interesting too, because like she's freaking out, she's almost drowning, she's screaming. Her mom has to like break into the bathroom, and when she finally gets out, she's like, basically like, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "I'm fine." And like, I mean, and I don't know. Like, to me, that's like more of like she had to be directed that way. I feel to like go from like manic to like so out out of control to just like to be like, I'm fine. Maybe not to like alarm her mother, but I think the transition could have been handled a bit better. Like her transition from like waking up after the first fight with Freddy and Glenn's like there and she's pissed off. That was a better transition from like freaked out, scared to like, now I'm pissed off at you. But like, I always like kind of like, there's no way if it was my mother, if I was like screaming in the bathroom like that and she had to break in and she's like, "Are you all right?" And I just go, "I'm fine." She's like, "What?" Like, I think my mom would have smacked me. Like you made a whole fucking scene. You're fine. Brooke, what do you think about Heather Langenkamp?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. Like, even like whenever she first is going to the police station to try and save Rod, like she just like bursts into the police station just screaming, and like she isn't like going calmly like, "Hey dad," she doesn't take the dad route, just immediately goes in, starts blasting and yelling and screaming about how she thinks Rod's getting in trouble like this, and like the cops are like, "Well, he's in his cell, he's fine." It's like,
I do feel bad for poor Garcia's like, "Yo, I picked the night shift so I can have none of this." Like what you're, and then like and then the next thing she says, like she screams like, "Look, it's urgent!" Like screaming at him, and he's like,
yeah.
Her transitions from one emotion to the next is, I guess, questionable in certain scenes, but I do think she gets better as the movie goes along.
Yeah.
I don't know what her like. I never actually looked it up, like if this was her first thing or not, or because she seems pretty like fresh in this.
Yeah, I think she definitely
rough around the edges, I guess.
I think she definitely calms down and gets into the groove, I think, into the sequel, definitely, and in the third movie. I think she's a lot more tolerable, I think.
Yeah. There is the issue of like in the third one, she seems too young to be in the position that she's in, like the whatever, like feels like a little kid and like dress up at certain points in that third movie, especially because she's paired with someone who's clearly older than her, that doctor guy in the third movie. But she does get better as the first one goes along. There are moments in Dream Warriors where I think she's highly effective. And then, of course, New Nightmare, I think with like a lot of age and experience, she just was better by the time she did New Nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think she's actually really good in like probably the most important scene for her at the end when she has to like basically turn her back on him. I think that's probably the best stuff she does in the movie, where she kind of like resolves herself like, "Oh, this is what I have to do in order to make this stop." And I think that's her best scene. And probably, if you're going to be a little mediocre in some scenes, you got to sell it in the end. So I think she sells it, what she needs to.
That's fair. She, She had deleted scenes in The Outsiders in 1983.
Oh, really?
And then she was in a TV movie called Passions in 84. And then she was in Elm Street.
Oh, they cut her scenes on The Outsiders. I would love to see what she was like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was pretty green then. Like she wasn't really like, you know.
And then like even like, by the time 3 came out, like she still wasn't in much. Like she was in a ZZ Top music video.
Wow.
couple one-off episodes in TV shows, and like that's pretty much it. And then she was in Dream Warriors.
Wow. And then I think she ends up she's married to a big like special effects artist now, which is what they added to New Nightmare to kind of mirror her life a bit. Yeah. And she's done some acting, like in some decent stuff recently. Like she still works. So it's good for her. I mean, I wonder. I mean, Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund, and Wes Craven, when he was alive, have all said when Johnny Depp, like they knew that he had it while they were making it, and that he was going places. Wes Craven tells a story about how his daughter was the one that they were like when they were auditioning that part. Like he came in and his daughter was like, "That's the guy," based just solely on his looks. Like that's the guy you should cast. And it's crazy to think that this is his first movie, too. And it's not that like he does anything here that is exceptionally like extraordinary, but he definitely has a look and a presence, and that it's not, it's not crazy that he went places after this at all.
Do you think? So we've gotten a couple legacy sequels of some horror movies recently. Do you think they could do one for this series, and would you want to see that?
So I would. I mean, I wouldn't mind. I know Heather Langenkamp has talked about she would love to come back and do one. She really wants it to be with Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, and he keeps saying that he can't play the part anymore because he's too old and like can't do the stunts and all that stuff anymore. But like kind of like that's what they have stuntmen for. And I think I think he can still play the part. But like I agree with him, if he feels like he doesn't have an end to do the physical stuff, then like have one of those young whippersnappers step in and do it for you, and then you do all the stuff that like you're good at. I think you guys might know, but like when they went to do the second movie, they didn't think they had to rehire him. They were like they had basically a stunt guy play him, and he's in one scene of that second movie, and it's the shower scene when the guy falls asleep and it's the coach in the shower and then he's getting whips in the butt with the towels. Totally different movie for a totally different time because that has its own interesting backstory. But in that, he's in that. This guy is in this one shot, and it looks awkward. He moves awkward, like doesn't really work. And they learned after filming that scene, they're like, "Oh wait, we have to make a deal and get Robert Englund back." And I mean, he knew how to play that part, and he plays it well. I mean, I know he's recommended other people. He's recommended Kevin Bacon as one person to do it. I can see that. I like that. Do I think that will it be easy, like as easy to do a legacy sequel as it was to like Halloween, 2018, and have the two sequels that follow that? I don't know. I don't know if like Heather Langenkamp's Nancy has. I mean, I guess it depends on you ask. If she has as much, like Laurie Strode had a lot of history, and a lot of people know who that character is, even if you're not a big horror movie fan. Jamie Lee Curtis is associated with it. Jamie Lee Curtis is also a bigger actress, and people know about her beginnings. I wonder if people outside of the horror genre would be interested or invested in seeing like catching up with Nancy all these years later. And you would have to retcon, I guess, 3 because she did die. There's that, but I don't know. Do you guys think that there's room for it? Like people want it? Is that the best way to do it, or is it just best to start from scratch and try to remake it again?
I would say like if you're doing all these legacy sequels now, and I mean they're not the best. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre was awful.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it'd be interesting if they got the right people back for it. I think.
Yeah.
Especially in like this time in like 2024, like I feel like you could do so much with Freddy with all the technology we have these days.
You can make some really cool dream sequences, I think. And like, I would love for it to stay mostly practical, but I think like having like modern day effects to kind of enhance some of those sequences would be really cool to see now today. I'm not opposed to it. I think I would love for them. I mean, I don't like the idea of these guys staying dormant. Like, I mean, I guess we don't need another Nightmare movie, but I would love to see Freddy Krueger on the big screen again. Same thing with Friday the 13th. I don't really need another one, but I hate to see it like kind of languishing. And like, I know we're getting that series, A24 series eventually, wherever they figure that out. Yeah. For better or worse, so people, however you feel about, what David Gordon Green did with the Halloween movies, it was cool to bring that back and then have it be successful and kind of show that those franchises can still be successful because there's still an appetite for it. I think Nightmare's been off the big screen for so long now that people would be ready for it. I actually wouldn't even mind a TV series. I think a TV series would work for Nightmare as well. But Mark, what do you think? Like legacy sequel, remake, TV show?
I don't know. Because like how you said, like you're gonna have to kind of create a whole other timeline, like how they did with Halloween, right? If you're gonna bring Heather Langenkamp back anyway.
Oh yeah, that means disregarding 3, and I don't even know if I want them to disregard 3 because that is my second favorite of the bunch. So I don't want to like pretend like that doesn't exist, but that would be the only way to bring her back. I mean, unless you kind of do the whole like, oh, it was a dream, so she didn't really die, or you can still maybe try to include it because it's the whole like messing with reality thing, right? With Nightmare, right? It doesn't necessarily all have to be real, I guess.
Yeah,
that might be a cheap way out of it, but
and I mean, like if Robert Englund doesn't want to come back, and rightfully so, the guy's 77, so to put on all that makeup and sit in a friggin' chair for however many hours it takes to put all that makeup on, I don't blame the guy for not wanting to do it at this point in his life. But if you're gonna do it, you got to pick the right person.
Yeah, I agree.
Like how we've already talked about, like if we're doing legacy sequels with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, like those guys, it doesn't really matter. Like you just find a big guy that can walk slow or that can hold a chainsaw. But with Freddy Krueger, you need to have somebody who's actually going to be able to fit that profile. And
he has to be able to act.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah. And like even still with the remake, what was it? Jackie Earle Haley?
Yeah. And a good actor. Won an Oscar too. Right? Yeah, I mean,
great actor.
Great actor. I don't even think it was his fault. I mean, like not bad. That whatever they did for his makeup effect didn't work. He just doesn't look good. From what I remember about the remake, I don't think anything that happened with that character was his fault because he is a good actor. I honestly think that most of those people in them, there are some good people. I always forget that Rooney Mara's in it. She likes to forget. She likes to forget she was in it because she said David Fincher basically saved her from like wanting to not make movies again after her experience doing A Nightmare on Elm Street. You got Kyle Gallner in that too. He's like everyone's favorite horror movie guy. I know he's in it. Thomas Decker's in it from the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and then Katie Cassidy. And I make this joke. I've met her a lot. She's very nice. But I've always made this joke about Katie Cassidy in horror movie remakes. I was like, if she is in one, it's not going to be good because she was in A Nightmare on Elm Street. She had a small part in When a Stranger Calls, and then she was in Black Christmas, which is, I guess, fine now. I can enjoy that movie for what it is now, but when I first saw it, I hated it. But still, like a good, fresh, young cast, and then you had like a pretty good actor playing Freddy Krueger. It was just like the execution didn't work from what I remember. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm curious. I probably should pop in that Blu-ray and watch it again because it hasn't really been that long since I've seen it. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to get the right people. And like, it's a matter of like, do you think fans will accept anyone else playing Freddy Krueger at this point? I mean, Kevin Bacon's a good actor. I think maybe you could get in a position where fans will be like, especially if Robert Englund's like, hey, this is who I think should do it. They might accept it. But other horror fans are a bit stubborn and they're like, I don't want Nightmare without Robert Englund. Like Heather Langenkamp actually thinks he can still do it. Like she when they're promoting the 4K recently, she was like, I think he's doubting himself and he can't completely still do it. I think he can, like, of course, like, doing the lines and all that stuff. But I was thinking about the physical stuff. You made a good point about the whole makeup process too. I mean, that's a lot when you're older too, like having to sit through all that. So it's a tough one. I go back and forth, like, do I want one without him or not? Because he's so associated with it more than anyone. There has been like cast changes. Of course, we have people's final girls in these that they love. Like, people love Nancy, they love Alice, Lisa Wilcox's character from the 4th and 5th one. There are people that they like, but like he's always the constant in all of them. So that's hard to replace, I think.
Yeah. What if we get someone like Barry Keoghan?
Oh, Barry Keoghan, that would be interesting too.
That would be.
He does like playing strange characters, so there's that. That'd be an interesting choice too.
That would be, actually. I didn't think of that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I think there is, at least story wise though, and I think there is room to do one. You have a really good story for this. I think it can still work today, but I would go legacy sequel route more than reboot if I had to choose. But I do struggle with the fact that I wonder if Heather Langenkamp has the same like kind of fan power behind her that like a Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode had to kind of spearhead that whole coming back to Halloween and doing that again. I don't know. I mean, maybe in horror movie circle she does, and people would. I mean, I know a lot of horror movie fans would love to see her do it and love to see her in it because it's just the nostalgia and people love the character. So it'd be cool to see. I have friends that would probably prefer to have Lisa Wilcox as Alice be the one that does it, because like she's probably the second favorite of that final girl bunch in this franchise.
Yeah.
But a lot of these people are like horror niche favorite people, like we know them, but like this do mainstream like moviegoers know them. Like, if I ran into one of my friends and asked who Heather Langenkamp was, they were like, I have no idea who she is. Like they would know.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Now, if I broke it down, I was like, hey, she's the girl in the first ever, she'd be like, oh, okay. But I don't know if it would be enough for them to like want to like see a new movie with her character in it. But it's not everyone. I'm pretty sure some people would love to see that continuation. It'd be nice, I think.
Yeah.
But that would be my prerogative if they did do it. The legacy sequel, I think. Or a show. I actually could see a show working too.
Yeah.
A show would be
streaming
cool.
show. Really, really cool.
Yeah.
Like solid, like 10 episodes, not too much. Like you can probably do a lot with that. As far as I do want to ask you guys this. How do you guys feel about the kind of Home Alone-esque climax with the movie traps and all? I mean, when I showed it to my friend Sean for the first time, he liked the movie, but he almost got taken out. But he's like, "Oh, this is silly." like this is like ridiculous. And also, he thought it was silly that like this guy has been. I mean, I know he's kind of weaker. They kind of suggest that he's weaker if you pull him out of the dream into reality, right? But he was like, this guy got instantly like he can't do anything right in these last like 5-10 minutes of the movie. like she easily she outsmarts him in a lot of ways. I mean, I think it's still a cool sequence, but I can understand why people think it's kind of silly the way it's all put together. But at least they kind of bring it up in a way that makes sense. Like Glenn, like she has a book, she's reading up on it. Like it's not like she just gangs the skill out of nowhere. So I don't know. I think it works for the most part. I can see why people think it's silly though.
Yeah, I think so too, because this series is all about like kind of like, well, not maybe in this first one, but like kind of like campiness of this is so stupid and silly, but it's like it's what makes it different than all the other horror movies we've had the past 20 years.
Yeah. What about you, Mark?
I mean, yeah, like it's an 80s horror movie, right? So there's got to be some sort of campiness to it, or it just wouldn't fit the profile. So I don't know. I enjoy it. I think it's a good final 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, and that also goes to the whole thing about you saying the cops are incompetent. I love that they don't need to know that like what's really happening is happening, right? But there's clearly like some distress going on in her house. Like she's broken the window, she's screaming for him. This guy to go get her dad. And this is like all happening across the street. Now, across the street, they do know that something happened to Glenn. Like he's dead. Like they don't know how his insides were splattered all over the room. But they know that. But they know that Glenn's dead.
Yeah, there's like so much blood coming through the ceiling, and like they are so calm while he goes in there. Like, what's that? Oh, the coroner's so sick, he threw up in the bathroom. Oh, okay. And like they just don't even care.
Yeah. There is like this nonchalant thing, like it's just like that happened at that house across the street. It's not only a random girl, but like you work with her dad. It's like she's like screaming across the street. She's been involved indirectly in these like 2 murders that have happened, and I think it takes like I don't know how long, but before he's like, "Oh, I think I better go get the lieutenant." Like after like she clearly is in distress at her house. I just thought that was funny, and as to your point about them just being completely incompetent in the movie. Not so much her father, which I guess is like he's in a position of like, I don't know what's going on with my daughter. This is kind of crazy. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but the rest of them, yeah, this is ridiculous. That all this is happening, and they're just kind of like, like so blasé about it.
Yeah. Typical Saturday.
Time. Yeah, you're like, it's more concerning because they know that's his daughter. I think it makes it more concerning that they're just kind of like, you probably should go get him sooner. Like you're, even if you're like, yo, she's going crazy across the street.
I feel like that's why I like the third movie so much, is because they kind of flip that relationship so much of the opposite, right? In the third movie, she relies on him so much, whereas this movie, like, he doesn't really seem to care that much for her.
Yeah, so like easy like when he uses her as bait to get Rod arrested. Because like basically like he knows that they're gonna like have contact with each other, and then like instead of asking, he's just like, "What the hell are you going to school today for anyway?" like he's just so mad at her, which is kind of true. Like the day after, I mean that was the day after, right? That all happened, and she's going to school, and like they kind of like blow it off as like this is what she needs to do to not think about it. I think most of us would skip school that day. It does lead to like one of the better scenes. I mean, talking about like the kind of dreamscape scenes, like that scene where she falls asleep in class, and then and I guess that's Daryl Hannah's brother reading the poem or whatever in the classroom scene.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really effectively done too. And then that image of like Tina in the body bag is like pretty disturbing too. Yeah, really. I really love all the like kind of like little nightmare scenes that lead up to where we get with like the climax and everything, like kind of seeing him sparingly throughout the movie and hints of like who he is. Also talking about like hints of him being gross. That he does the whole tongue thing in that scene with her. Then there's the whole telephone tongue thing, which my mom has only seen bits and pieces of the movie because she's not really a big horror movie person. But that's one of the scenes that she has seen, and she was just like deeply disturbed by it. She is like one of those things where I was a kid, she's like, I don't see how you watch these. I'm like, whatever. It's not. Yeah, you're right. It's not for the faint of heart. But yeah, that line of being like, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy," and just have his tongue come through the ridiculous.
And like the kind of like bedtime like nursery that they have for Freddy, I think works really
well.
Oh
yeah, the whole like 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
Yeah.
That sticks with you if you're a kid. I know, like Brooke, you saw it in your high school years. As a kid,
I mean,
that sticks with right. Yeah, that sticks with you, and very easy to learn. And it's funny because like they're like kids that like I think probably know that and probably never seen the movie. They probably just heard it today. And it really kind of makes Freddy Krueger almost this kind of like urban legend in the movie a bit, which is kind of adds to like the mystery behind him, which I kind of wish they kept more in like the movies that followed. But yeah, I also think, I guess if you have a talent like Robert Englund, I guess you are gonna use him more as the movies go along, then give him more to do, and as you see what he's capable of, because he's a trained actor. And like he wasn't like, this wasn't someone that stumbled upon horror movies. He wanted to do like real shit, and and
like stage acting, I think, right?
Yeah. This became his bread and butter by accident. But I mean, I don't know if you guys watched that documentary that they put out with him. I think it was a year or two ago. Kind of goes in depth of his career, and he had a lot of things that he wanted to do, and he's not ashamed of doing this stuff at all. Like, it's paid him handsomely over the years. Oddly enough, for a while, probably more than Wes Craven until they did New Nightmare. Wes Craven was kind of put out of the franchise a bit when he didn't want to do sequels, and they were pretty. He was pretty honest about how like he had a kind of falling out with Robert Shea and New Line about because again the whole thing with the ending that putting that button on the ending was not his idea, not the ending that he wanted to do. That was a Robert Shea New Line decision, and he had no interest in doing sequels. And they were like, "Well, all right, fine, we're going to do them without you." And his deal did not involve follow up, so they made a lot of money off of it before he did, really. Until I think when he came and they were going to do New Nightmare, they kind of signed a new agreement, and then he ended up getting what he deserved from it. But it took 10 years. So 84, like that came out in 94, right? New Nightmare. So it took 10 years for him to rectify that. And but I think Robert Englund was paid more handsomely for the franchise for a while. And it's interesting that like Robert Englund has talked candidly about knowing how Wes felt about the sequels and how the franchise went after A Nightmare on Elm Street, and he tried to have like very realistic conversations with him about this kind of like the business is what happens, understanding his point of view, but also like Robert Englund, if that documentary Never Sleep Again, where they go through all the Nightmare on Elm Streets about how they were made, Robert Englund has something nice to say about every single one of them, even the not good ones. Like he'll find something to be like, well, he'll say that the third one's the fan favorite, the second one became really big, like in the gay community. It became big in that, right? The fourth movie is like the MTV generation one, and that's why it's popular. He'll find anything nice thing to say about all of them. Like he loves the franchise, and he loves and he has his finger on the pulse of what the fans want from it, or what they did want from it. So, like, if Wes Craven could be the gatekeeper the whole time, it's probably good that at least Robert Englund could be in some regard, at least. But in regards to the ending, I know we mentioned in the beginning, like, I mentioned how I felt like it should have ended the way Wes Craven wanted it to end. When you watch it now, it's like, okay, this is silly. Or you understand, like, I get why they wanted to put that button at the end of it. And it doesn't mess up that, like, for one of my friends, it actually ruined most of the movie for him, because he was like, it was so grounded and felt so like it was doing something different until that. And it almost feels like a cheat.
I mean, like, what was the other franchises like produced by? Like, was New Line Cinema just looking for their own franchise? Maybe is that why they did that?
Well, they were like not big, right? So at that point, they were an independent studio. I mean, they've been honest, like that Nightmare on Elm Street was their first really successful movie, which is why they called New Line Cinema the house that Freddy built for so long. I unless he kind of felt like he saw franchise potential in it. I kind of see how people think it's a cheat, because it does feel like it cheapens what happens right before it. Because what she does to get rid of him is, like, poignant might be the wrong word, but there's like some meaning there after all that character's gone throughout the entire movie. That how this guy has like stalked her dreams, killed her friends, killed her mom right before that. Essentially ruined her life, and then she has this moment where she stands up to him, and that's all you need to do. And like it's and the fact that this thing comes right afterwards, where it kind of does feel like a cheap, like, oh, gotcha moment, almost like a they had to have their Carrie hand coming out of the ground thing. I guess.
I mean, it doesn't like make me as mad as like some like drama movies or kind of like thrillers where like you watch the whole movie, then the very end it's a dream sequence, and it's like, okay, those piss me off the most. Like, this I don't think it bothered me that much, honestly, because it's like a horror movie. You're not really watching it for the story and stuff like that. Just kind of watching it for the kills and the special effects and all that, right? So it doesn't really bother me that much. Like, kind of gave me that kind of like Beetlejuice vibe, even though it's before Beetlejuice, but like,
Yeah. What about you, Mark?
Sorry, I'm looking through the history of New Line, because I didn't realize that they're an independent film company. That's kind of cool.
Like I guess when they released the first Ninja Turtles movie, it was the highest grossing independent movie of all time for a certain little moment. they go on to like do Lord of the Rings and all that stuff eventually.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah. Awesome powers.
Became like a pretty big studio.
But for me, like, I'm kind of in the same boat as your buddy there, where it just kind of takes away from the whole feel of the movie. Because, like I've mentioned before, like this movie is a lot more serious than a lot of the other franchise. And then you have this just ridiculous scene at the end where the car is the same color as Freddy, and then the way that Nancy's mom gets pulled back into the door. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like if they would have done a better scene to kind of segue into more of the franchise, I would have liked it a bit more. But I just feel like, I don't know. It did feel kind of like a cop-out scene to me anyway.
Yeah. And I have friends that defend it. They're like, oh, like it kind of asks the question, like, was this all just a dream? Like, what is a dream and what isn't a dream? I'm like, all right, I guess you can overthink it that way.
Yeah, I don't want to overthink this movie. It's like,
yeah, I don't either. And like, and like the thing is, I think like because you know why that scene is there. Like once you get older and you start learning about how these movies were made, and you know why it's there. And like it's there not because it felt right for the film or it felt right to do it story wise. It's there because they wanted a hook to maybe do another one. That's what makes it feel a little bit cheap. I would have loved to have it in the way Wes Craven wanted it to end. And also, you still could have done another one without that cheap. They could have figured out a way to do it. I think, but they wanted the ending that indicated that Freddy was still alive. I think that we're still there in some way. But yeah, like the movie was building up to that scene in the room basically, and that is where it should have stopped. And it might be like an anticlimactic ending compared to like everything that's come before it, but it makes the most like thematic sense, like as far as like what the movie was selling. And I wish he had the opportunity. And I know he when he interviewed a lot about it. He doesn't like how they chose to end it. It's not his ending of choice, But he also was in a position where New Line was giving him money to make this movie that he really wanted to make, and I think that's the kind of there's also that pressure of doing it too. Like, hey, I won't be able to make this movie without, without them. So I think that's why there was pressure for him to do it. But definitely feels out of place compared to because even compared to like all the other like dream stuff that happens in the movie, it does feel like it feels tacked on.
Yeah, almost like it should have been like a mid-credit scene or after credit scene.
I think I would accept that more because maybe I wouldn't have seen it. Until someone mentioned it to me, like, "Hey, did you check out that scene in the mid credits?" Like, oh no, probably for the best if I didn't. And I just to kind of wrap things up, and I know that we're talking about the first movie, not to talk about every single film in the franchise, but I know that one of you mentioned that you're not big fans of it going on. What were like just quick thoughts of like why the franchise doesn't really work completely for you as a whole as it moves along?
So for me, I actually haven't seen past 3. So
there you go. Actually, you're in a safe spot then.
Yeah.
Except for New Nightmare is good.
Even though like I own the Blu-ray pack of all the movies, I haven't seen past 3 because I feel like I don't know. For me, Dream Warriors is so good. And then hear from everyone else, it kind of drops off after that, except for New Nightmare. But I just haven't visited the rest of the movies. I probably should, honestly. But for me, it just the first one and third one I absolutely love. The second one I'm not a fan of at all. So yeah.
The second one's interesting because I didn't like it for a long time, and then when I saw was it Mark Patton who's in the lead in that and his documentary about what he went through making it.
And I did watch that as well, that documentary that came out a while ago. But
it made me look at it differently. I think it has a lot of issues. Like it feels very much like a way different movie than the first one. Even though Robert Englund's Freddy is still creepy and like scary, he's not quippy at all in the second one. It has some interesting ideas, I think. definitely some imagery that I will never shake. Him coming out of that dude's stomach being one of it.
Oh yeah.
One of the things that scene still wrecks me, and it wrecks every friend I've showed it. Like they can't even look at the screen the entire time. Definitely have some issues, but to live like if not for New Nightmare, I would love to live in your happy space where it stops at 3. Because that 3 is like because 3 is actually really good. I think New Nightmare is a better film than 3, but 3 is my second favorite of the bunch. It's highly entertaining, and I think the ensemble cast works really well together. I think those characters are all really good.
Yeah.
And I think like they are pretty well developed considering, you know, it's a horror movie for the 80s. They give them a lot more depth too than they probably would in any other franchise. So yeah, to live in your happy space where like, yeah, this all ends at 3. I kind of want to be in that spot. What about for you, Mark?
For me, I think it just boils down to what I mentioned earlier, where like people seem to kind of lose touch with who Freddy is, what he was, and why people are out to get him in the later movies. Like, I think, Dream Warriors for me is my second favorite in the franchise. But I don't know. I love Freddy as a character throughout them. But it's just like what they do with him in the later movies where it's just like, I don't know. You kind of lose interest almost at like the 4 or 5 mark. Like you don't really care about the characters anymore. You don't really care kind of what happens with the story. I do like, I kind of, now that we're talking about it, I kind of want to go through and rewatch all of them. But
that's how I felt about the remake. I was like, maybe I should watch it again. It's been
they
come out in 2010 or I forgot exactly when.
Yeah,
a long time ago. I don't think I'll come out of it like loving it. But maybe I'll, but it's maybe not fair of me to be like, yeah, I didn't like it. And it's been all these years later. There might be something to appreciate about it now.
Yeah, but like I love Freddy versus Jason. I think that's such a fun movie.
Yeah, it's completely fun. It knows exactly what it is too, and that makes that work for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But like I don't really consider that part of the franchise.
Like
yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think they lose who the character is.
Yeah, I agree. That can be, I think for every horror fan, they have like, oh, I love Freddy when he was like scary. Some people love him being a smartass, and ironically, I mean, I think like he set the tone for like other franchises too. Like I don't think Pinhead becomes as prevalent in Hellraiser without them looking at Nightmare on Elm Street and being like, oh, let's do that with our guy. Because he also can speak and he has a personality. So they are able to do that with him too. Can't really do that with like Michael Myers, like you said, or Jason. Child's Play, they do that with Chucky a bit. I mean, he is already kind of like that in the first one, but then they expand on that a bit more and gives him way more personality, So
like look at Bride of Chucky. It's like
look at Bride of Chucky, right? And I think that kind of all starts with like a Nightmare on Elm Street where you have this character who it has a personality and can manipulate, and he can actually, he's more than just someone that stalks around, walks around, and, killing mindlessly. He has like a brain. Yeah. And I think that, for better or worse, with the success of a franchise like this, they expose the character more, and they think, I think they saw what happened, because at the time, before Freddy versus Jason, Nightmare 4 was the highest grossing of the bunch. And I honestly think that it was because it followed a really good movie. I think because it followed Dream Warriors, and I think it kind of piggybacked off of that. But that was probably in the 80s peak, Nightmare on Elm Street. And actually, when you do watch, if you do ever watch Forbrook, you can actually tell like there's a reason why they call it the MTV Nightmare on Elm Street, because it really feels like an 80s music video in some sense, like in a lot of ways. In the way the characters look, everything about that movie feels like a product of its time. And it's so weird because Dream Warriors is an 80s movie, but doesn't feel as much of it as 4. 4 really feels like the quintessential like 80s movie, and they were trying to capture that moment, and Freddy being that moment too, where they're like, all right, we gave you a little hint of what his personality can do, let's amp that up to 10. And that's exactly what they did. And yeah, for better or worse, that's what we got. Can't really, I mean, I like that we have a franchise, but I do agree that like it loses its way down the line a bit. Yeah, you got him flying around on a broomstick and Freddy dead, the final nightmare, like he's the Wicked Witch of the West. So it gets out of hand. You have Roseanne and Tom Arnold making cameos in that movie. It gets completely out of hand. So I can see being frustrated with the direction it goes in. But hey, with this one, this one's pretty grounded. I think it still holds up 40 years later. At the point now where we can score the movie, similar to how we did with Idle Hands. Whether or not you want to letterbox score it or do a letter grade or 1 through 10, however you want to score it, it'll be totally up to you. Who would like to go first?
Yeah, so I rated it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I think it's like right on the cusp for me. I think on like a 4.5. Like, I think it kind of depends on my mood and watching it. Like, I think it is one of, the most legendary horror movies ever made. Just the stuff that Wes did with it, the practical effects, the creepiness. Just Robert Englund just became this just icon, really. So yeah, 4 out of 5 for me.
Hey, what about you, Mark?
I gave 4.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Nice.
Basically, all the same reasons as Brooke, and yeah, I kind of agree. Like it almost goes up and down, just kind of depending on what your mood is and how much that final scene is going to piss you off that day. But yeah, I mean, Freddy's an icon. In my opinion, he is. I don't know how to describe it, but like of the three major ones from that time period with Michael and Freddy and Jason, like he's the most. I'm drawing a blank on the word that I'm trying to say. He has like the most character, right? Like he's not boring. He's fun to watch. He's creative in his kills. He's not just like kind of stalking people around. And it was a very different story for that time period. Like I feel like Wes Craven really took a risk on this one. Yeah. And I think it paid off because like slasher movies back then, it was the same thing with every movie, right? Like it was one character kind of chasing this group of teens around. And it was the same sort of thing. You're getting attacked with a knife. I don't know. But with this one, like with him attacking them in their dreams and everything like that, I just think it was a really innovative story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I give it 4.5 as well. And the only reason I'm not perfect scoring it is because of the final scene at the end. I mean, if it would have ended the way he wanted to end it, I probably would have been like 5 out of 5. But yeah, I agree. And I also think what makes the character scary too, like all the character development and depth for that character is being put on by what the characters say about him. Like that, whatever you learn about him is based on like the way they're describing him before you even see him. The way they're like saying what you like really fully see him is the way they're describing them from their dreams, and then like just the backstory that Nancy's mom gives about him. So that's all you really get, and then the rest of it is kind of like left up to your imagination. And I think that is pretty effective too. That's all you're kind of left with, and it's just enough to make that character kind of mythical in his own right, where it's just like, like we said, like an urban legend, basically. I think that, and also what Robert Englund does with that character too, is a lot, and has a lot to do with like probably more than maybe what was on the page. Like I kind of wonder like how much of that was there and how much Robert Englund just added to it. And then probably was enhanced once he saw himself in like the makeup, and like I know he's kind of talked about what made him so like kind of fake play angry in the first movie was that like, and why he was so easy for him to like want to scare the other younger cast, because he said they're all fresh face and good looking. He had to sit in that like makeup chair for like hours, so he's like pissed off by the time he's done. So he had all this kind of like fun like pent up anger towards the younger cast in the movie, and he kind of used that in a way as well. So I think a lot of what Freddy Krueger is what Robert Englund added to that character. That was probably more than what was on the page. And then also, as I don't know if you guys agree, I still maintain that like all the directors from this era, like the iconic horror movie directors, since Wes Craven is no longer with us, I think he is the most consistent. And like you have people like Toby Hooper who have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then what happens after that, it just depends on your taste, I guess.
Mhm.
But one would argue that he never really achieved that greatness again. John Carpenter is an interesting one because Halloween's a great movie, and then you have people that love The Thing, and he had like a good run in the 80s, but one could argue that he never really fully, for some people, lived up to what he created with Halloween.
Mhm.
Wes Craven had hits in different decades. He has Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes in the 70s. He has this in 84, and then gets completely rejuvenated and reborn again with Scream, and gets to have like a pretty big career because of Scream. And in the 90s, he gets to do 3 more sequels after that. Does stuff like Red Eye that did pretty well on its own. Like Wes Craven, I think, out of all those directors, I think had the most consistent career as far as like the horror movie icon directors, I think. Because he probably had a lot of fresh ideas, and like I also think it helped that he wanted to be more than a horror movie director, and like he kind of found his bread and butter doing horror movies, but I think he had more talent and depth, and that expanded beyond the horror genre. And I think he was doing more than just trying to make horror films. I think he was trying to make films rather than just making horror movies. And like most of his movies stand the test of time, like at least his classics do. Yeah, this being one of them. So yeah, really good one. I forgot to mention that I always forget that Charles Fleischer is the doctor in that. He's the voice of Roger Rabbit. Apparently, he was very weird when he made this movie. He's the doctor in the Dream Clinic. Wes Craven said that he improv like some weird stuff, and they were like, "Dude, like dial it back. Like you are in one scene, and you are like turning this into like something it's not. Don't do that." But yeah, I saw his name when I was like scrolling through, so I forgot to mention him. But yeah, the doctor is the voice of Roger Rabbit. So
I did not know that.
Yeah. If you haven't watched Never Sleep Again, it's a really fun. It's a long documentary about all the Nightmare on Elm Street. If you're only interested in the first Nightmare, you can just watch the beginning of it and you're good.
Okay.
But they go into detail about the making of each one, and they actually do interview Charles Fleischer, and he talks about his character as if he was in like the whole movie. He's only in one scene. Well, I want to thank Brooke and Mark again for joining me again so soon after Tales of Horror. I'm glad you guys came back for this. Also, I'm saying this on here now because I'm going to share our anniversary list with you guys via email, because you actually can come on and talk about not horror movies if you want to. You don't have to just talk about horror films. That some of the Tales of Horror people were like, so we only get to be on your show once a year, and I was like, oh no, if you're fans of other genres, you can totally be on. I do not discriminate. So like there's a lot that we're doing before the end of the year, so if there's any, I'll send it to you guys. If there's anything that I want to hop on you're interested in, just please let me know. And it was a pleasure having you guys again so soon. And I'm glad you were able to talk a Nightmare on Elm Street with me.
Yeah, thanks for having us again, man.
Thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. And as always, you can find Back to Blockbuster wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods. Those are all great. But you can also catch us on the Playlist Studio app. They are a podcast network, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting, mostly all the editing. I have to give them a shout out because during the last week of Tales of Horror, we released an episode 7 days leading up to Halloween, and they actually edited all those episodes for us and got them all out on time. So thank you so much for doing that as well. And just before I forget, just in case, where can everyone find your podcast? I'm assuming everywhere you get your podcast, but just so they know.
Yeah, I mean, we're on any of the major podcast platforms like Spotify, YouTube, or not YouTube. Well, we are on YouTube, but Apple, Google, any of the minor ones too. Kind of lose track of everyone.
It's hard, man. Like, oh yeah, like my friend David's like, I listened to you guys on Overcast. I was like, I didn't even know you were on there. That's good to know. And also, yeah, re-listen to their Midsommar episode so you can see how far they've come since their humble beginnings. 5 years is a good run. I mean, we're coming up on. I mean, we're going into our third into the new year, and it's. We understand the journey as well, so it's exciting for you guys to be doing it that long and maintaining that together. I think that's pretty awesome, and then you get to find other shows like this along the way. So it's all cool. It keeps it interesting and new.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah. So always a pleasure. Like I said, you can come on whenever you want. And hey, if you ever have room for, I would love to actually have to do one with Jackson on. Like, I feel bad when like everyone's like, we haven't seen him yet. He's just been really, really busy. His classes are done on December 14th, and he's back to our regular scheduled programming. So he'll be on a lot more often then. So hopefully we'll be able to do one with like all of us on, and that'll be really cool too. So you guys can get to know him as well.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, guys, thank you for joining us for our Nightmare on Elm Street 40th anniversary. Brooke, Mark, thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Peace out. Boom.